Welcome to this video presentation, VHDL Code Editing with Sigasi Studio. My name is David Clift and I'm an applications specialist for First EDA. First EDA is a value-added distributor of electronic design automation solutions in Northern Europe, specializing in software and hardware solutions for electronic design and verification. When you think of tools we need for FPGA design, your mind immediately thinks of simulators and synthesis tools. How much thought goes into the selection of your code editor? How often do you write a piece of VHDL code and then compile it to find it doesn't compile due to a missing semicolon, or you haven't quite got a statement just right? Whilst it is possible to integrate your compiler into an editor, this doesn't give you instantaneous feedback. You will see that using Sigasi Studio, it checks your code as you type it. Sigasi Studio is also sensitive to where you are in your code, not only providing feedback on constructs that you might be using, but that construct information is sensitive to where you are in the code, so you'll only get valid options. You might not always be writing new code. Sometimes you'll need to review code. Maybe you wrote it, or maybe it's legacy code. This can be a time-consuming task, but if your editor understands your data types and variables, and you can jump to the declaration from the usage, be it a variable, a component, or a type definition, understanding your code becomes much easier. In Sigasi Studio, these objects become hyperlinks, so a definition is always just a click away. A good code editor can make a world of difference to your design entry. So let's have a look at Sigasi Studio. So here we are in Sigasi Studio. Sigasi Studio is built on the foundations of the Eclipse framework. So if you're already using that framework, you can get Sigasi as a plugin and just add it to your current Eclipse installation. Or you can download it as a complete working package with the framework already set up for you, as we have here. Now, the framework's made up of a number of tabs. We'll discuss the tabs as we move through the demo, and let's start off with the Project Explorer tab. In here we've got our project that we're working on today called Demo, and within it you can see folders and files, and there are files more within the folders. And if we want, we can have multiple projects open at the same time. So let's open a VHDL file. And as you'd expect from any good code editor, Sigasi has proper highlighting. It also has block select and column select. Really useful if we want suddenly to decide that, oh, actually we don't want to use standard logic, we're going to use standard U logic. So we can just go away, change all of those standard U logic. Well, not today, thank you. So let's uncomment those. But what makes Sigasi Studio so good is it understands the syntax and semantics of VHDL. So if I were start adding a signal and use the keyword completion, it will let me just complete the keyword, in this case signal, or it'll give me a template to complete a signal declaration, and we get a prototype of what's going to be added shown on the right hand side. So let's add the template. The cursor is immediately moved to the next field that we need to complete, in this case the signal name. So we'll call our signal Fred and press tab, which moves us to the data type. Well, I'm going to leave this signal at standard logic. But because we're aware within Sigasi Studio of the semantics and syntax, if I start adding an architecture, keyword completion no longer works for me, because an architecture wouldn't be valid at this point in our code. You don't declare architectures within architectures. So what are the other benefits of this ability to understand the language syntax that we have within Sigasi Studio? Well, let's take this wait statement. Because we know the language constructs, we can do things like blocks or structural select. So we can select the weight, or we can select the line it's in, or the surrounding code, which in this case is the if statement, or the process that holds the if statement, or the architecture that holds the process. And similarly, we can deselect. If we want, we can, just using drag and drop, move our code or duplicate our code. Now you see the next great thing about Sigasi. Because it understands the language and syntax, when we create an error, like we have here, it highlights it to us. And it highlights it in a number of ways. First of all, we get a marker in the right hand margin. Now this margin covers the whole scope of this particular file, so we can see there are a number of issues in this file, and we can jump to them. So signal thread, which we added, isn't used, or we've got our duplicate declaration. You'll note there's a marker in the left hand margin next to our line. Again, if we hover over that, it will tell us what the problem is, and the code is also underlined to highlight it yet again. But more than that, there's also this problems tab, which contains the errors across the whole project. This is really useful for documentation. Or if we're working in a team of multiple engineers, we can save this as a file and hand it over to whoever may be responsible for any particular block. It's very easy to do that. We can just say File, Export, and export the markers. And we've export them just for this project, and that will create an HTML document. If we open it, you'll see all the files with errors are listed, what they are, what their severity is, and it's also date stamped, so we know when this file was created. We can use it in our documentation, etc. And this problems tab is hyperlinked. So if we double click on one of these, it will take us to that error. So here we've got a signal or a data type with no declaration. And you can see we now have possible quick fixes that Sigasi Studio is suggesting to us. We could declare signal A, or we could change it from being signal A to signal S, because A and S are close together on the keyboard. We may have made a simple typing mistake. Well, actually, I want a declaration of signal A, so I'll select that. Now, notice that not only has it declared signal A, but it's also declared it in an appropriate type. Because it was being assigned to signal S, which is of my type, it's assumed that signal A will also be of my type. If not, that type is highlighted and selected, so I can just change it. Well, I don't want to do that. Signal A of my type is fine. Let's show a bit more about the templates within Sigasi. Let's add a case. Now, as before, we can just add the case keyword, or we could just add a generic case template, and then we can put in the expression and the choices as required. But again, Sigasi is a bit cleverer than that. It sees that we have a couple of enumerated types, S and A, or signals of enumerated type, I should say. And if I select the templates for those, you'll see it's building a case that iterates over all the enumeration values of those particular types. So let's use S for this. So here we go. We've got a case which now iterates over all the possible states of our enumerated signal S. Let's expand our case statement and add a new possibility, and look, it's immediately told us it's a warning, and we've got another couple of quick fixes. It's saying we could declare a signal stopping. Well, we don't need signal stopping, or we can add it to the enumeration. Let's do that. So you can see immediately it's added it to the enumeration type, my type. So that's typing and editing our VHDL files and creating VHDL files. But we don't always get to create new stuff. Sometimes we have to work with the files that have already been created. So let's pick a file. Here we have a hierarchical netlist, and you'll also notice we've turned the block diagram view on so we can see a block diagram of the design, and we can jump to any particular part that's in the design. Now, wouldn't it be handy to be able to see what the entity of any of these parts are? So here we've got blackjack. But what is BJack C? Well, if we press F3, it will take us to the component instantiation. But Shift F3 will take us to the entity declaration. So this is the entity declaration for that particular part. Very useful when we're jumping around analyzing our code. But Sigasi will help us further than that. If I open the outline window, you'll see it'll list all the distinct parts of our file. So we've got all the ports, all the declarations, all the statements, and double clicking on any of these will jump us to those. This is actually a state machine. So if we've got the dock option of Sigasi XL, we can turn on the state machine viewer. This again is hyperlinked, and clicking on any of these will jump us to that part of the code. Let's go back to the blackjack file, and in here you'll see there are a number of component instantiations. Now let's say for some reason we need to change the port name on this OR component. It's used in the file in a number of places. So with a standard editor, I would have to edit the port name on the instantiation and the declaration, as well as the entity, but not with Sigasi Studio. I can simply select the port or signal name in question. I can say refactor element name, and let's make it input 1. Hit return, and you'll see not only has it changed in the instantiation, but also in the declaration and in the entity map. Very useful. Let's go back to our test bench. In here we've got this new card signal, but what does it drive? So if I select it and select find net, it will give me a list of where it's connected, what drives it, and what loads it has attached. Again, very useful for exploring a piece of foreign code or checking that the code that you've written is connected up correctly. Finally, we may want to simulate our design. So Sigasi also supports interfacing with a number of common EDA tools. So for example, we have Riviera Pro, Active HDL and ALINT from Aldec, as well as Xilinx iSim or Cadence NCS. So let's summarize what we've seen so far. Sigasi Studio is a design entry tool and code browser for your VHDL projects, with type time syntax checking as easy as a spell checker, powerful code browsing where everything is a hyperlink, and code skeleton generation, component instantiations within just a few keystrokes. Sigasi Studio's built-in compiler knows the meaning of each word you type in your code, even if it's declared in a different file. This works for all project objects, signals, constants, entities, data types, etc. within your design. See the declaration and documentation with a single keystroke. Search where the object is used in your entire design. Identifiers become hyperlinks, powerful navigation. Investigate and understand legacy code in no time. Power features specifically for hardware designers, like Net Search, which finds all the drivers and loads in your source code. Find all the signals and ports that are connected, even if your code is broken or not ready for elaboration. Thank you for viewing this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative. If you require further information, please visit our website at www.firsteda.com. Thank you.